scripts help some of the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. I started my professional hypnotherapy career in 1983, and I have, over the course of the years, had hundreds, many hundreds of clients who saw me for hypnotherapy, who needed regression therapy, but failed to achieve their desired results after seeing one or two other hypnotists before they saw me, because the other people they saw did not offer regression therapy. They tried to give them a certain technique that was designed to help them overcome something. One of them was a man who saw me for fear of flying, and he was put in a no-win situation. I'll tell the longer version at the workshop, but basically his employer said, you either get on that plane or you'll be demoted and switch positions with a manager. And with the position swap comes a reduction in salary. So he had motive. The person he saw used some sort of quick phobia cure, and he said he was fine on the outbound flight to Sydney, Australia, but he had 16 of the most terrifying hours of his life flying over the Pacific Ocean on the return trip from Sydney. He said he literally thought he was going to die of a heart attack, having a panic attack several miles above the Pacific Ocean. And more than one physician who has taken my parts therapy or regression therapy workshops over the years have said that the fact that the wrong technique was used and the fact that regression therapy was not used could have been a fatal mistake to this man. Bruce and I met at an annual hypnosis conference in 2011, and we found that we both shared the same pet peeve that too many people want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So
I'm a psychologist, licensed psychologist in Florida. I've been doing hypnotherapy for a really long time, since 1987. As Roy said, we met in 2011 or thereabouts, and we really felt that we had a meeting of the minds, and we had a lot to collaborate on because, you know, our work sort of followed independent parallel paths. And I've been using regression without really knowing it for a really long time as a therapist. Whether or not a therapist uses hypnosis, memory is the stuff that therapy maketh. In fact, memory obviously is a part of our everyday life. We recall good things, we recall bad things, we recall things that make us sad, we recall things that make us happy. There are triggers all the time that essentially activate recollections because memory works via associations in our mind. And so you can't avoid regression. Emotional regressions are happening all the time. The question is how can we utilize the natural process, psychological process of regression in the service of the therapy? And what Roy has done over the years, based on my reading of his books, which I actually read before he and I met, is he systematized and structured the different techniques for doing analytical hypnotherapy, which would be, of course, the main facets of those being regression therapy and parts therapy. Some people think of that as ego state therapy. And Roy's mentor, Charlie Tebbets, was an independent pioneer in developing parts therapy based on his work. The point is, Roy structured and formalized and made it simple for therapists, not necessarily easy, but simple for therapists to apply a lot of the techniques and the concepts for utilizing the natural process of regression in therapy, not to take people back and look for what really happened, but help people to reconcile their bad feelings about themselves, ergo their memories of the past, with who they are today and what they want to accomplish. But what we're going to do in this workshop, Roy and I, is we're going to make it simple for those of you who are listening who decide to take our course, that you will be able to understand how you can utilize this ubiquitous natural process of remembering, which we all do, no matter what our station in life, no matter what our intellectual level. you're going to be able to utilize that process with a very simple to apply, structured framework based on our 50 plus years of clinical experience in doing analytical hypnotherapy. Roy, based on the teachings of his mentor, which was Charles Tebbets, and myself, based on the teachings of my two mentors in hypnoanalysis, who were the late Dr. David Cheek, who was an OBGYN pioneer in hypnosis, who was a contemporary of Milton Erickson's, and who worked with Leslie LeCrone and wrote many books with him in the past, as well as working with Ernest Rossi, writing books with Ernest Rossi as well, and the work of Dr. Dabney Ewan, who is a student of David Cheek and with whom I have worked with for the last 25 plus years.
One of the reasons a lot of people are concerned about regression is because of the risk of false memories. When I work with a client and use regression therapy, I explain in the pre-talk the fact that we don't always remember things correctly and that we're dealing with perceptions, because there's a difference between a forensic application of hypnosis versus hypnotic regression therapy to help someone discover and release his or her emotional attachment to a perceived experience. When the client is dealing with perceptions, whether the memory is fact, fantasy, or a combination of both, the release of his or her emotional attachment to the perception oftentimes removes a great stumbling block to finally being able to overcome the presenting problem.
So the idea of false memory, well, Roy, way before Roy and I actually began working together, Roy had elucidated the risks of false memory very well in his writings in terms of the work of the hypnotherapist who utilizes the natural capacity that people have of memory in terms of doing regression therapy. And I was very familiar for many, many years with the guidelines that were published by the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis on the clinical uses of memory. We all know that memory is not a true accurate tape recording of, what happened. It's a reconstruction, and it's constantly being reconstructed every time we remember something consciously as well as unconsciously. So what we have to be very careful for, and this problem was brought to the forefront of American consciousness in the late 90s by the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, was this idea of people, as a result of therapists doing shoddy work, imprinting in highly suggestible clients or patients these ideas through suggestion that something happened that didn't. Roy, in his work, and Roy is not a licensed psychologist, but he's a scholar and a clinician bar none of clinical hypnosis. Roy had the intuition and the scholarship to put it all together in his writings to help psychotherapists and hypnotherapists do smart, sensible, and careful hypnotic regression therapy, which was why I was so excited to co-author the book with Roy when we met in 2011 or 2012. We're going to present this in our 2-day workshop. So I think this workshop is going to be an extremely exciting opportunity for professional hypnotherapists and for practicing psychotherapists who want to learn how to utilize memory appropriately and sensibly and productively in their therapeutic work, even if they don't do hypnosis, to take this workshop. You don't have to do hypnosis. Let me just insert this and then turn it over to you, Roy. You don't have to do hypnosis to benefit from taking our workshop on the art of hypnotic regression therapy. I'll leave by saying, all therapy is hypnotic and all therapy involves regression. I turn it over to you, Roy.
I use regression techniques to empower the subconscious to present the core cause, whether it's a real memory or a false memory or a combination of both. And that's one of the reasons I give a pre-talk on false memories before I ever initiate a regression. Although sometimes clients, when they're really concerned about a presenting problem and quite emotionally involved with it, sometimes they will go into a spontaneous regression just talking about it in the intake interview. So that's why I would like to see every mental health counselor and psychotherapist learn about the risk of false memories, even if they don't call themselves a hypnotherapist.
And that will be taught in this class in detail, how to sort of avoid the pitfalls of that even happening. Also, you talked about, you mentioned spontaneous regressions. Some people also have spontaneous past life regression. How would you address that?
Whether you believe in past lives or whether you're skeptical or whether you're undecided, there are ethical guidelines for all three of those, because it's important to put the client first. A close personal friend of mine who's no longer living was Paul Durbin, who was a Methodist minister. He was a total past life skeptic, but when a client requested a past life regression, he would honor the client's request because he was very client-centered, and there are other possible explanations for the phenomenon, and we offer those explanations in the Art of Hypnotic Regression Therapy.
I know what we're going to cover in our workshop, which is uber important, is the preparation phase, because that's where you seed and clarify the client's expectations for what they're going to find out and what they're going to discover. And one of the things that I will tell clients almost all the time, individualizing how I say it in my hypnosis pre-talk, if you will, is the idea that because memory is a reconstruction, because we reconstruct, reproduce, and the key components of these words are reproduce, reconstruct. We reproduce a memory every time we remember something. So what we need to do is we need to help the distressed person who is distressed about a memory or a set of memories to reproduce those memories in a way that it's no longer distressing. And that's all about their own self-concept and what those memories mean about them. So we're changing the memory regardless, because every time we remember, we change the memory. And what we're going to do in this workshop, Roy and I, which is why this is so exciting and so important for people to take now as opposed to last year. You might have read our book, The Art of Hypnotic Regression Therapy, 3 years ago, but the way we're going to teach it when we teach it this June is going to be different than the way Roy and I taught it last year, because our thinking has evolved, our thinking has gotten reconstructed. We've remembered our model and our theory as we've continued to do therapy, as we've continued to teach, and as we've continued to go through life ourselves as human beings. So this time around, when Roy and I teach HRT, or Hypnotic Regression Therapy, in June, we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on the preparation phase so that we're clear on how we set regression therapy up with clients so that we don't misrepresent, again, represent what we are trying to accomplish. We're going to explicate in very clear terms with case examples and the opportunity to practice how we take a client who wants to feel better about themselves in reference to some life events that made them feel, or that they think made them feel lousy about themselves, and how we use the techniques of hypnotic regression therapy, which I used to call hypnoanalysis or rapid hypnoanalysis, how we utilize those techniques in a systematic and structured way that's client-centered to help the client in as few sessions as possible. For me, it's often in 3 sessions to get past their past and start feeling better about themselves so they can move forward productively into their future.